1942. Footsteps echoed off the damp cobblestones as a Wehrmacht officer made his routine walk back to headquarters. The fog rolled in thick from the harbour, creating perfect cover. A shadow separated from a doorway. 3 meters, 2 meters, 1. The weapon came up, pressed against the base of the skull. What happened next defied everything the officer's training had taught him about warfare. There was no thunderous crack, no muzzle flash lighting up the fog, no explosion that would send nearby soldiers running. Just a sound, no louder than someone dropping a book on a wooden floor. The officer crumpled. By the time his body hit the ground, the killer had already vanished into the maze of medieval streets, the murder weapon cooling inside a heavy coat. That weapon looked like absolute garbage. Picture the ugliest firearm you can imagine, then make it worse. A crude metal tube that resembled industrial plumbing more than military hardware. No sleek curves, no polished steel, nothing that would make a gun enthusiast's heart race. British soldiers who first laid eyes on it thought someone was playing a joke. This thing was supposed to kill Nazis? It looked like something cobbled together in a basement workshop by someone who'd never seen a proper gun before. But here's what nobody understood until they witnessed it in action. This ugly piece of pipe could do something no other weapon in the world could accomplish. It could end a life in complete silence, in a room full of people, without a single witness understanding what had just occurred. The well-rod pistol wasn't built to look impressive. It was built to solve an impossible problem that was getting British agents killed across occupied Europe. Let me take you back to 1941. Winston Churchill had just created the Special Operations Executive with orders that sounded simple, but bordered on insane. Set Europe ablaze, organize resistance movements behind enemy lines, sabotage German operations, assassinate collaborators and high-value targets. The SOE started training agents and inserting them into France, Norway, Denmark, the Netherlands, anywhere the Nazi boot had come down. These agents needed tools, and here's where British intelligence ran straight into a wall. How do you kill someone quietly? Really truly quietly? Not movie quiet, where a silencer makes a gun whisper. We're talking about actually silent elimination in the middle of a city, potentially surrounded by German soldiers. The existing options were medieval and horrific. You could use a knife, which meant getting close enough to smell your target's last meal and wrestle them to death. You could use a garrote, strangling them while hoping they didn't thrash around and alert everyone nearby. You could try poison, then wait hours or days, hoping it worked and that the target didn't survive long enough to talk. What resistance fighters desperately needed was distance. Just a few meters. Enough space to have a chance at escape if things went wrong. They needed the certainty of a bullet, the instant finality of a gunshot, but without the gunshot part. Every conventional suppressed weapon failed this test, spectacularly. The suppressed stun submachine gun still sounded like a jackhammer, around 130 decibels of ear-splitting noise that would bring every German within 2 blocks running. Standard silenced pistols of the era, maybe 120 decibels. Imagine trying to fire one inside a building and expecting nobody to notice. You might as well ring a church bell. The British needed something that had never existed, a weapon that could be fired in an occupied apartment building without waking the neighbors, a weapon simple enough that it couldn't jam when your life depended on it, a weapon small enough to disappear under clothing. The specifications sounded like science fiction. A team gathered at a nondescript facility in Welwyn Garden City, just north of London. Station 9, they called it, part of the Inter-Services Research Bureau, which was bureaucratic speak for the place where British engineers invented diabolical ways to kill people. Major Hugh Reeves led the design effort, working with engineers whose identities remained classified for decades. They approached the problem like acoustic physicists, not traditional gunsmiths. Understanding their solution requires understanding what makes guns loud. 3 things create the noise of a gunshot. First, you've got the explosive gases from burning gunpowder escaping the barrel. That's your primary bang. Second, there's the bullet itself breaking the sound barrier, creating that supersonic crack you hear. Third, the mechanical components of the gun cycling, slamming metal against metal, ejecting brass casings. All 3 had to be eliminated or dramatically reduced. The team started with the bullet problem. Standard ammunition exits a barrel at roughly 350 meters per second. The speed of sound sits at about 30-43 meters per second. Every standard round creates that distinctive supersonic crack, and no amount of suppressor technology can silence physics. The solution? Change the ammunition, load the rounds with less gunpowder, reduce the velocity to around 290 meters per second. Subsonic. Flying below the sound barrier means flying silently. Problem 1 solved. Mechanical noise came next. Semi-automatic pistols are inherently loud machines. The slide crushes backward. A spent shell casing flies out spinning. A new round slams into the chamber. It's violent, mechanical, noisy. The Welrod's answer was radical simplicity. Make it bolt action. After each shot, the operator manually turns a knurled knob at the rear, extracting the spent casing and loading the next round. Slow? Absolutely. This wasn't a weapon for firefights, but in terms of noise, you could barely hear it. Problem 2 solved. The engineers didn't attach a suppressor to a gun. They built a suppressor and put a gun inside it. 2/3 of the Welrod's length consisted of an integrated suppressor system. A series of expansion chambers and baffles created a maze for the hot gases. When the gun fired, those gases entered the suppressor and began expanding gradually through chamber after chamber, cooling, slowing, losing energy. By the time they vented to the outside air, they'd lost most of their punch. The numbers tell the story better than words. A standard 9mm pistol hits about 160 decibels at the muzzle. That's instant permanent hearing damage territory. The Welrod, 73 decibels. A car door closing. A cough in a quiet library. At 10 meters distance, the sound became nearly indistinguishable from background urban noise. Someone dropping a glass. A book falling off a shelf. Not a gunshot. Never a gunshot. Compare this to what Germany and America were developing, and the Welrod's superiority becomes stark. German suppressed weapons were mostly adapted service pistols. A Walther PPK fitted with a screw-on suppressor might achieve 115 decibels, quieter than unsuppressed. Sure, but still clearly identifiable as a gunshot. German suppressor technology focused on different goals anyway, mainly reducing shooter signature for snipers rather than enabling assassination in crowds. The Americans produced the HDM, the High Standard Model D, a suppressed .22 caliber pistol used by the Office of Strategic Services. This weapon achieved impressive silence, around 90 decibels, but the .22 round created serious limitations. Stopping power was questionable. Multiple shots were often necessary to ensure a kill, and each additional shot increased risk. Penetration through heavy winter clothing was unreliable. The Welrod's 9mm round, even with reduced powder charge, delivered substantially more knockdown power. Look at the specifications side by side. The Welrod achieved 73 decibels with a 9mm round. The HDM hit 90 decibels with a .22. German suppressed pistols rarely got quieter than at 115 decibels. In the brutal mathematics of silent killing, the Welrod existed in its own category. Nothing came close. The weapon had one significant limitation worth mentioning. The integrated suppressor didn't last forever. Rubber wipes inside the baffle stack sealed around each bullet as it passed through, and these wipes degraded with repeated firing. After roughly 30 to 50 rounds, the suppressor's effectiveness declined noticeably. The weapon remained functional, but grew progressively louder. SOE agents were instructed to request replacement Welrods through supply drops rather than attempting field repairs. This limitation actually enhanced security. A resistance fighter couldn't use the same Welrod for dozens of operations. The weapon had a finite operational lifespan, which meant it got replaced regularly, which meant serial numbers stayed scattered and tracking became nearly impossible. The Welrod's legacy extends far beyond World War II. The design principles pioneered by Major Reeves and his team at Station 9 influenced suppressor technology for decades. Modern suppressed weapons owe their effectiveness to lessons learned from that ugly piece of pipe. The British military continued using Welrod variants long after the war ended. Updated versions served in conflicts from Malaya to Northern Ireland. The fundamental design was that sound. Today, original Welrod pistols are extraordinarily rare. Most were destroyed after the war as part of security protocols. Those that survived ended up in museum collections or private hands, valued not for beauty but for historical significance. This was the weapon that let ordinary people fight back against occupation, that gave resistance fighters a tool for evening impossible odds, that turned silence itself into a weapon. The genius of the Welrod wasn't in making a good gun. It was in making a gun that didn't sound like a gun, that didn't look like a threat, that could end a threat before anyone knew a threat existed. In the shadows of occupied Europe, where every sound could mean death and every face could be an informer, that ugly piece of pipe became the most feared weapon the British ever created, not because of what it looked like, but because of what nobody could hear.